Hey everyone, and welcome to The Rational Republican, a podcast where we look at complex issues facing us here in Oregon and around the nation. We'll try to address issues from a nonpartisan perspective and view our disagreements through a lens of respect rather than tribalism or divisiveness. I'm James Ball. This is Nick Perlasky.
Hey listeners, how we doing?
Today's podcast is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors. ProLift is your one-stop shop for residential and small commercial garage doors, from openers, springs, and rollers to full reinstalls. They offer same-day service on all garage door repairs with no extra charge for evenings or weekends. Serving the greater Portland metro area, call today and set up your free estimate at 503-558-6349 or at proliftdoors.com/Portland. Again, that's 503-558-6349 or proliftdoors.com/Portland. Hey everyone, and welcome to The Rational Republican, a podcast where we look at complex issues facing us here in Oregon and around the nation. We'll try to address issues from a nonpartisan perspective and view our disagreements through a lens of respect rather than tribalism or divisiveness. I'm James Ball. This is Nick Perlasky.
Hey listeners, how we doing?
Today's podcast is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors. ProLift is your one-stop shop for residential and small commercial garage doors, from openers, springs, and rollers to full reinstalls. They offer same-day service on all garage door repairs with no extra charge for evenings or weekends. Serving the greater Portland metro area, call today and set up your free estimate at 503-558-6349 or at proliftdoors.com/Portland. Again, that's 503-558-6349 or proliftdoors.com/Portland. On this episode of the podcast, we have Angela Plowhead here, who is running for Congress in CD6, the brand new district. So, Angela, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And second of all, I'd like to apologize real quick to our listeners for the sound quality. We made it all the way down here to Salem to talk to Angela and realized that I forgot a significant component to the podcasting, and so we're using the computer's microphone, so apologies for that.
I mean, we normally sound like us anyway, so if listeners are comfortable listening to us drone on about stuff, it's going to be, the sound quality is worse, but if you're putting up with us to begin
I'll try to clean it up in post, but we'll see how that does. But yeah, so Angela, thanks so much again for coming on again.
Absolutely.
And so you're running for Congress. You and Nick were talking about this before we got on the air, but why don't you just give 2 minutes to talk about who you are and how you got involved in politics? Have you run for anything before? You know, what was your prior involvement before going for this new congressional district?
Yeah. So I guess really it starts with me being a veteran. So I was an intelligence analyst in the Air Force, and my husband and I met in the Air Force about 6 weeks after I joined, and then got married 2.5 months later, and we've been married for 25 years. We have 2 children, ages 8 and 13. You know, once I'm convinced of something, I'm convinced and I stick with it. So that's a facet of my personality that I think is just kind of there, and that I think will lend well to being in politics. So I'm teachable. I learn. I love to know more stuff. I love to seek out information. And as an analyst by training, that really kind of set up what I did in the rest of my career, which after the Air Force, I got my graduate degree in clinical psychology. And so I'm a doctor of psychology. And I own a small practice. And I did that beginning in 2014 after about 12 years altogether in the VA. And so my heart for veterans is definitely there, and something that I've continued to try and do and to serve and to advocate for. And so I'm also a geropsychologist. So I primarily see older adults, and I have been an advocate for seniors and people with disability since I opened, well, even before I opened my practice. I did that in the VA as well, but have done that politically since 2014 as an advocate. And so lots of lobbying of legislature around those kinds of issues, both here at the state level as well as working at the county level, and then also advocating at the national level for those issues.
So I mentioned we're here in Salem. Do you happen to know Satya Chandragiri?
I sure do.
Yeah, he came on the podcast way back at the beginning a couple years ago.
Like episode like 5 or something.
Yeah,
like that.
so Yeah, I just you're going through your bio, and it's very similar to his, working with veterans and whatnot.
He's actually endorsed me.
Oh, good. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, no, Sachi is great. Saw him at the because I ran into you at the platform convention in Bend, and Sachi was out there too. So yeah, that was good times.
I feel like honestly it's a good opportunity to kind of bring up. There is anytime there's a mass shooting in particular, your Republicans like to focus on we need to focus on mental health. The left says we just need to ban guns, just period, full stop. It's like, all right, well, I don't think that's going to happen. And the right says what we need to do is focus on mental health, because there's a lot of underlying issues that come up with each different. And I feel like that's one of the things that we as a party have not been super great on. I feel like that's one of the things that we talk about it, and then nothing ever really gets done. Nothing ever really happens, yeah. And so it's wonderful to see somebody who's got, similar to Dr. Shanjagiri, somebody who's got a background in working with individuals on issues that can be a lot more difficult to talk about than just, hey, my taxes are too high, I want to vote for a Republican because he said he's going to lower the taxes or whatever. And I think it's going to be a really interesting lens into how you focus on campaigning, how you focus on legislation. Are there any issues here in CD6, and it's brand new infancy, that specifically relate to mental health, that you're kind of like, this is something that needs to be addressed at a federal level, and the representation that we've got now is falling asleep at the wheel?
Yeah, so there are a number of issues related to mental health. It certainly creeps into a lot of the issues that we have with homelessness, but it's very prevalent in our youth. So it's very much an issue in what's happening in schools right now. So Oregon is 50 out of 50 for Oregon actually addressing mental health issues and for prevalence of mental health. And this is in the nation. So we are last. We couldn't be any lower for our ability to address and actually treat mental health issues. And so part of that is because there are a lack of providers. So one issue that can happen federally is that Medicare can change who they accept as providers.
Okay.
Very simple fix is, so right now, Medicare as a mental health provider can only be billed if you are a licensed clinical social worker, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, but they don't accept any other master's level therapist. And so there's also lots of peer-supported programs that have been shown to be have efficacy and are very well suited to things like a school environment.
Okay.
Where you could actually get in there, address these issues. And one piece I didn't mention is that youth in Oregon have twice the depression rate as adults in Oregon. And I already told you that we are 50 out of 50, right? Mm-hmm. So it's extremely bad. We also have pretty high suicide rates in Oregon. And so those are definitely issues that can be addressed at the federal level, at least in part, to help the local level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned back before we turned the radio on that you were, or turned the mics on, you were looking at getting you said you were going back to school for political science. Are you thinking about it, and then kind of just life got in the way? What got you interested in politics? Was there a particular issue, or just this is kind of the time in life where it was good for you to jump in?
You mean at this point in my life?
Yeah. Or so what got you started in politics?
Well, what made me interested in politics initially was just, so I was in the military, mm-hmm. So I was seeing a lot of sort of the inner workings of the government and how bureaucracy worked. I was 19, 20, 22. So, there were a lot of things happening in our country at that time. And so that's where it really kind of started for me. I didn't have a lot of exposure to politics when I was younger. And so at that point, that's when I first got interested in it. But then, life just kind of led me to being a psychologist versus going into politics at that point in time. And so as a psychologist, like I was saying earlier, advocacy is something that has always been important to me. And I think you can do that best at the policy level. Mm-hmm. If you can change policy, you can affect everyone. Mm-hmm. Where it's absolutely important to work at the individual level, which is what I do as a psychologist. But to do the advocacy piece, I think, is where you really affect people overall. And so it can affect change for an entire community.
That's we heard something similar. I remember in our episode with Lisa Reynolds, the doctor who beat James in HD 36.
Very close race.
You covered the spread. You covered the 15% that you got. But she was kind enough to come on our show, and she had talked about it. I just talked about guns, and her issue is gun advocacy, and I think all disagreed a little bit with some of her takes on that one, but that's okay. Still friend of the pod. Happy she came on. But she said something similar. She said, I've been part of the moms demand action, and I've been part of so working with kids, whatever. And it's one thing to work from the outside in, and it's another thing to kind of be on the inside and try to affect positive change at a much larger level. Yeah. And it sounds like that's the route that you're going to go, and it sounds like you're going to have a great opportunity to hopefully do so. One of the unique things about running, certainly running for Congress is a whole ball of wax in and of itself. But running for Congress in a new district, there's not the opportunity to say, the last guy who was in here was a schmuck, and so we need to boot him out or something like that. Or, right now, I think on the other side, Loretta Smith has declared, Andrea Salinas has declared. I'm sure maybe one or two others, maybe one or two other Republicans as well. But how do you kind of go and broadcast a message for a district that didn't exist in the last election, and there's not really anybody to kind of make the bad guy?
So I don't feel like you have to make people bad guys in order to win. So, this district is one that I think I'm especially well suited to. So of the 6 counties in this district, I have lived in 5 of them. And the one I didn't live in is where I went to graduate school. So George Fox. So is in Yamhill County. And so I went to school there for 5 years. I also worked there in that community for 3 years. So I have a lot of experience in all 6 of these counties. And, I was their neighbor. These are places that I shopped, that I lived, that I, am raising my family. So, I'm very familiar with what's going on in these communities. And for the communities that maybe I haven't been in as much of recently, I'm reacquainting myself with those communities, and really as a psychologist, my job is people. And that's how I'm running this campaign, and that's why I'm doing it. It's for this country. It's for the people in this country. And that's my motivation. I don't want my children, I don't want my neighbors' children growing up in a country that is socialist and that is communistic. As an intelligence analyst, I saw what happened to those communities. I saw what happened to those people and how their lives were degraded because of that. And I'm not willing to let that happen on my watch.
My wife is Romanian, and so we talk with a lot of, she's my age, a little bit younger, and so didn't really live under Ceausescu in the or at least not for a large portion, but her parents did, and a lot of the people in her church did. And I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but during the COVID lockdowns, when everything shut down at the very beginning, everybody kind of took a step back, and then slowly and surely things came back or whatever. After a couple of weeks, they all just went back to church because they're like, I've seen this movie before. Yeah. I know what happens when they start telling you can't go to church, and we're just going to do it. And if they, if they're going to come at us and throw us in jail, been through that before.
Right.
So very interesting. The Dimitri, Dimitri with Slavic Vote. He's a friend.
Hopefully I'll meet him.
Oh, well.
it's on my to-do list to reach out to them because I would love.
Soshenko, Dimitri Soshenko. Yeah.
They also have a pod.
Yes.
Get a little cross-pollination there going on. We can find a way to make that happen.
Another, the Slavic community also, yeah. So I very conservative, very individual liberties, very interesting people to talk to because they've experienced this. Right. And, going back to your experience in the military. So I was in the Army for 8 years. And if you want an example of a socialist regime, just look at the military. And the military works because the goal is not to make money. You don't need to worry about things like profit and loss and taxation and whatever. Your goal is to accomplish a mission, and it works very well for accomplishing that mission. But when you have a very top-down, very regimented, universal health care, you get all your food taken care of, you get to your housing taken care of, you get everything taken care of for you. And they do that so that you can, focus on the mission. You try to apply that model to anything that's not regimented like the military. And I could not imagine trying to impose that and having it work with American citizens. I mean, you see people, we're just, culturally, it would never work.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know about when you were in, but I can tell you when I was in, there were master sergeants that were on welfare.
Oh, wow.
I know at one point, my husband and I, we were both senior airmen. We were enlisted. Mm-hmm. And so we were making $9 an hour.
Wow.
So,
wow.
And we had it really good because we were a military plus military couple,
mm-hmm.
So being dual military, we made more than a lot of people that we were in the same situation with. But, in that kind of environment like you're talking about, you don't necessarily, you're not making the highest pay.
Yeah.
You don't, you get some housing provided. We actually lived off base, but, you might have housing provided, but it might not be the best housing.
Yeah,
right?
it's whatever they give you.
It's what they give you, and that's, you lose choice. Mm-hmm. So one of the big things that I tried to advocate for and push for when I was in the military was them actually doing testing that had to do with aptitude. So not just aptitude testing like they do, but something that has to do also with your personality, so they could see where a best fit would be. Mm-hmm. And I was told, no, thank you, senior airman. And that was one of the things that motivated me to become a psychologist. Because I said, you know what? I'm going to get educated and I'm going to show you how this really should work. And my life took me in a different direction, obviously. But that was one of the things that motivated me.
That's a really good point. Whenever the government gives you something, it removes that choice.
It removes freedom, yeah.
Yeah. And, in certain cases, I like to use the fire department as a good example. I don't really need a choice when it comes to the fire department. I don't need to look up Yelp reviews when my house is on fire,
right.
And find the best fire department in a competing capitalist system. So that Nick's over there laughing very quietly.
In the car on the way down here, we had a longer conversation about Google and AdWords and SEO and everything. Yeah. And I can just imagine, what the Newburgh Fire Department would pay to have its ad up versus the Gamble County Fire Department, something like that. It's just like, no, our water is 4 degrees colder. You 4.9 out of 5 stars Yelp verified. Like we're the best fire department that we've got. Like
there are government services that are needed and that are necessary, but you take, and that's where that line is between what should be government provided and what should be individual. That, I guess that's a matter of perspective or a matter of opinion. Yeah. But I think it's important to acknowledge that when you give something over to the government, they're taking a little bit of your freedom along with it, even if that's a good thing.
Exactly. I mean, they choose your job.
Yep.
They choose where you live.
Mm-hmm.
They choose whether or not your family gets to come with you.
Yeah.
They choose what you eat. They choose how long you have to eat. I cannot tell you the conversations that other girls and I had in basic training when, we had been conditioned to eat an entire meal in 3 minutes. And we were like, we're never going to get to date again.
See, I did the opposite. I lost weight in basic training. I just had not worked out 6 days a week my entire life. So anyway.
So I'd be curious to know, You've obviously got an incredibly impressive CV, and there is, unfortunately, in Oregon, myriad issues that need to be addressed by competent, professional, caring individuals. Right. And I think at all levels, you have a dearth of that, if we can be frank, in Oregon. There's just, you mentioned 50th out of 50 and youth depression, and it's just like, we all know how poorly PERS is doing. We all know how bad, the tax structure is here in Oregon, how much we all pay in tax, everything. For somebody with the unique experiences and accolades and education, how is it that you chose to best address the issues at a federal level to jump in with, instead of going if I may, the more traditional route and running for a local city council seat or a local state rep seat first?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that if you're going to affect something, then you do it at the big level.
Do it at the big level.
You do it. And so yes, that would serve. I would serve one community if I ran for city council, or, I would serve just Oregon if I ran for state legislature. But by going for U.S., then I'm not just serving Oregon, I'm serving all of America. Mm-hmm. And, that's what I've done my entire career. When I was serving veterans, I wasn't just serving the veteran in front of me. I was serving all the veterans that were associated, right? And when I was in the military, I wasn't just serving my base. I served our entire nation. And it wasn't just serving our nation here, it was serving our interest abroad. Mm-hmm. So that's just how I'm wired to think.
So I'm just curious, the nuts and bolts of this race a little bit. You don't have to get too deep into the strategy, but have other Republicans filed for this seat, or are you okay?
There have been other Republicans that have filed, yes.
Okay, I know that there's a couple Democrats. I don't know. What do you think your chances are?
I think I am uniquely suited for this position. Uh-huh. Like I said, I am probably the only candidate that you will find who has, that much experience with all 6 of the counties that are being served by this position.
Well, you're the only one that I've seen at a couple of events that I've been to. So I don't know what everyone else is doing, but you're making your way around the state and meeting people, and so good on you for meeting people and going out and doing things. Yeah,
when I commit to something, I commit, and like I told you, I only knew my husband for 2.5 months when I married him, but when I committed, man, that was it. we were in for it, and that was it. We were committed.
That was it. Got it.
Oh my gosh!
So it's like what, a D+1 or something? So basically a toss up, right?
It's a very
shallow D.
Yeah, shallow D.
Yeah. Okay.
District. Yeah.
I'd love to know. So when I graduated college, I went to DC to go work for a congressman, and it's funny because when you get there, there's Republicans and Democrats, mm-hmm. but I think the far more divisive issue is, are you a House side person or a Senate side person? I had friends on the Senate side, and they're like, you have to run every 2 years. You have to, raise all this money. We're the elite intelligent senators, and we looked at Congress as mm-hmm. this is somewhere you can go to actually get things done, and mm-hmm. if you have an idea, you can actually put it out there and find a couple mm-hmm. people to work with and go through and get it done.
Yeah.
And on the Senate, you have to get buy-in from all the committee chairs, and it's slower than molasses and everything. So you end up getting very divisive partisan sides, not on the R&D partisan, but the S or C partisan. Are there any? Presumably all Republicans, but if there's anybody that you like on the other side, that's great too. Is there any elected congressmen whom you feel are good individuals to emulate, or people that you're looking forward to working with?
Dan Crenshaw.
Okay, Texas, the Texas boy.
Yep. So he is just an inspiration. Okay. I love his story. I love his boldness.
Service member as well.
Yeah. Yeah. He I think really gets the heart of the people. And, when you look at his information, he is all about the people. And so that's what I really like about him. Someone who's not there for self-serving interests, but that is there to serve. And that's really what this is for me. This is about serving my country.
Yeah.
And like I said, something I've done my whole life. It is not something that's new to me. This is not something that I think would be. I don't think this has been a surprise to anyone who knows me. They might be a little surprised I'm running for Congress versus another office, but I have a heart for service, and that's mm-hmm. really what this is about. And we have so much history of having politicians versus people that are in it to serve.
Citizen servants, and that's the idea. The whole I know I've said it to James. I'll say it to you since we're sitting here. Thank you for your service. Mm-hmm. But anybody who served in the military is always looked at with as wow, this person put his or her life on hold for several years, or for maybe an entire career to make the world safe for democracy, make the United States a better, more free, more secure place to live, so that all of us can go out and do whatever crazy things we like record podcasts on Monday nights, and we have the ability to go do that. A lot of countries don't have the ability to go do that.
Right. Well, and especially once you introduce communism, when you're talking about curfews, and you're talking mm-hmm. about being limited in what your choices are as far as who you associate with and what kind of occupation you have, how many children you have, where your children go to school. And, there's so much that I think is trying to be introduced, and it's being slowly crept in. And, we're seeing it with our kids in school right now. We're seeing it with, what happened during COVID. Why do we still have food shortages? And we are, 20 months in.
Yeah.
And things like that, which are just mind-boggling to me when we live in such a fertile valley and there are farms literally all around us. Mm-hmm. Should we have any problem getting produce?
Yeah, right.
Well, and especially and it's one of those, when the pandemic started, it's just like, okay, this is, unprecedented since the Spanish flu. We all got to do something. And everybody at every level, regardless of your party, was just throwing stuff, throwing the kitchen sink at the wall, whatever. We got to do something to figure it out. And then we started and moved forward. And it's just like, all right, now we know a lot more about it.
Yeah.
Why aren't we doing this in a little bit better of a manner?
So I think things could have happened a lot faster if we would have been open to conversation from everyone. But that's not what happened. What happened was people would throw out ideas and people would say, you're a conspiracy theorist and you can't talk about that. When, if we used to look at things as every idea was a legitimate idea. We used to call them brainstorming. Do you remember that in college? Like, we had brainstorming sessions. But now the idea of actually thinking about and talking about and legitimately looking at everything and throwing everything on the wall and not saying anything is stupid, but exploring it, used to be a thing in America.
I've said it before, and I think one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest issues we had, or mess ups of the whole pandemic, was putting Fauci on TV. The way that I see it, and this is going back to my military experience, because I was a captain, I was on battalion staff for a while. The way I see it, Fauci is like your S2. He's like your intelligence officer. And, your intelligence officer can be really, really good at intelligence, but knows nothing about operations, knows nothing about logistics, knows nothing about personnel, knows nothing about, he's a virologist. And so what you do in the military is all these different, these subject matter experts then inform the commander what they're, from their point of view. Then the commander takes all those things into consideration and makes a decision. In this case, Fauci is the virologist, but he doesn't know anything about economics. He doesn't know anything about mental health. He doesn't know anything about, schools and all of the other things that were the logistics, supply lines. I could have told you at the beginning, and I'm not an expert by any means, but I said it at the very beginning of this podcast, like, we're going to have supply shortages because you shut everything down and things don't just show up. And this is sort of the urban rural thing as well. Portland will get up on their high horse about certain things, and I'm like, rural people, or we subsidize Eastern Oregon or whatever. I was like, your grocery store, like, your food doesn't come from a grocery store. It comes to a grocery store. And if those supply lines get cut, you got 3 days of supply. And in 3 days, you will have no food on your shelves. So if we built a wall around Portland and stopped all transit coming in and out,
or out,
who do you think would last longer?
Who wins on that one? Yeah,
Eastern Oregon lasts a lot longer than Portland does. So shut up about your subsidizing the rest of the state. It's more like a trade imbalance. The money goes out of Portland, but the food comes in, and everything else that's consumed in Portland goes in. So if you give your S2 the ability to make all of the decisions for your battalion, you're going to have a bad time.
Right.
Because or your S3 or your S6, or, and military terminology here, but you take one of your subject matter experts and let them make decisions for the entire thing. Yeah. But this is the military. You can't just tell Fauci to go sit down. Once you put a microphone in his face, everybody's, the press is going to go to him, and nothing against Fauci. He's doing what he's trained to do. He's doing what he's supposed to do, which is focus on the virus and focus on virology. And he's very, very good at that. He knows nothing about all of these other things that are now affecting us.
Right.
And so we listened to one staff member when we should have been listening to all of them. And it should have been, going up and our leaders making a decision based on all inputs rather than just one.
Absolutely.
So it's not his fault. I think it's something that Trump messed up. Probably not intentionally, but or whoever Whoever gave him that first microphone.
Yep. Well, so you actually just touched on something that I think is kind of interesting. There are 4 congressional districts that sneak and crawl their way into Portland, and you've got a pretty good mix of, you've got a little bit of urban, but you've got a lot of rural. There's going to be some density issues, some urban issues, but there's going to be a lot of ag issues, going to be a lot of water issues that come up here.
Absolutely.
Obviously, you're the wine capital of the state. You're going the wine capital in the world, I'll argue. Let's show this podcast to anyone from California.
France or Italy.
Those people. If there's some Italian that's tuning into this podcast, like this is his first episode, boy howdy, welcome to the club. I apologize. I'll buy you a Chianti or something. But how do you look to kind of balance that in an effective way? Because from where we sit in Portland, like it's very clear that the imbalance between urban Oregon and rural Oregon is
it's real
schismatic, if that can be a word.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of different values, but I think there's also a lot of similar ones. And so I think if we're looking for what's the same, there's kids everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone loves their kids. They want the best for their kids. So, let's focus on kids. Mm-hmm. Everyone's being affected by the economy. Who isn't being touched by inflation right now? Yep. Mm-hmm. And we've got to do something to manage that. I don't think passing another multi-trillion-dollar spending bill is going to help with that. Actually, I'm pretty sure the experts have said it won't. There are things that are going to be common to all of us, and if there's some of those issues that might be more skewed towards the rural than the urban. I think immigration is one of those things that definitely touches more of the rural communities, mm-hmm. more so than it does the urban communities because of the agriculture. Yeah. And so, I think we can speak to all of that, but even though that in that particular realm, that's more of a rural issue versus an urban issue, it's not that people that live in urban areas don't care about it. Mm-hmm. So, and there's certainly things about that we can look at, like, I can't think about, what's been happening on the border without thinking about human trafficking, mm-hmm. And, if people care about their kids, they're going to care about human trafficking. We have a slavery issue going on right mm-hmm. now in America, and we need to wake up to that, and we need to do something about it. And so part of that is managing immigration. Mm. And so, if you care about people, you're going to care about immigration, mm-hmm. and you're going to care about stopping human trafficking.
Mm-hmm. When you have people coming across the border without any kind of documentation or checking or anything, it's some of them are going to be carried against their will.
Absolutely. And we have a lot of evidence that it's happening. Yeah. And, if you talk to any of the DAs, the sheriffs, the judges, like I have, they'll tell you we have an issue with human trafficking, with slavery here in America. And, we're not addressing it as a people. Yep. And, I think it's something that I think we need to start using that word. I think human trafficking sounds too nice. It down to the bones of it, it is slavery. Mm-hmm. And that we have slavery happening, and it's not far away. This isn't happening in another county, in another state, in another country. This is happening the next street over.
A friend of mine, I don't want to say her name because I didn't get her permission, but runs a charity called Expose Hope, which fights human trafficking in mm-hmm. mostly Beaverton, Hillsborough, mm-hmm. Portland metro area, mm-hmm. and has been doing this for years. And we'll talk to you about how a lot of times they're using the strip clubs as a way to either recruit or, sell women into prostitution. And we need to get her on. She's a Republican. Side note.
I was just talking, there was a group, there were 2 groups actually down at the Capitol this past weekend. I was there with them talking about what happens in human trafficking, and really just giving the honest view of how they got trafficked. There were 2 women there, actually all 3 women that spoke there, other than me, had been trafficked or had had an attempted trafficking of either them or their child. And so, and these are women that were here on American streets.
Yeah.
One was literally taken off of the street.
Wow.
Kidnapped, thrown into a trunk.
Jeez. And like you say, to be able to have conversations about stuff like that and see nothing get done about it from a legislative or policymaking perspective, when that's a very serious, endemic, ongoing problem, is certainly just frightening.
Right. And to know that there have been, we know of, just under 200,000 kids that have come across the border unaccompanied. Those are the ones we know about, right? What's going to happen to them? And some of them are toddlers. We're never going to get them back to their families.
Yeah.
And we don't even know how they came to be, where they were. Were they sold? We don't know. That happens here on our streets.
Yeah. Yep.
I can tell you, I've had clients that, their parents sold them.
Jeez.
These are issues that happen every day in America that people underestimate are actually going on.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of, I don't know, classism is the right word, but I think of the podcast we did on prison reform a while back. And I feel like it's one of those problems that everybody kind of knows is happening, but the people in charge are upper middle class, and it doesn't really affect anybody that I know. And so it's like a poor people problem, I mean, and it's not, but it's like, I don't know anybody who's been trafficked. I know a handful of people who've been in prison, but not very many.
Yeah.
And so this is a problem that doesn't really largely affect me or the people that I deal with on a mostly daily basis.
Oh, I'm going to challenge that a little bit, because one of the women who gave her story, her father was a VP of a Fortune 500 company.
Oh, really?
And she was taken, like when I said, she was taken off the streets and thrown into a trunk.
Wow.
At the age of 14.
Wow. Well, okay.
Yeah. So we might not know it. All we know is that a child's gone missing.
Sure.
And we might consider them a runaway, or we never know what happens.
Right.
But oftentimes it's going to be that they were taken. And so one of the women told a story about how, once she had been taken and groomed, then they would force her to go out and groom other girls and boys and pull them into this. And so,
well, if you read look at what Jeffrey Epstein would do that, he would get high school girls to go out and recruit other high school girls to go find people. Yeah, it's sick what people will do.
Yeah.
So,
and these are our children. We've got to save them.
So how do you fix the immigration crisis in 5 minutes?
Exactly. So, I think there are a number of things that we can do. So, I don't think anyone really questions that the wall has been super effective. And for the areas that had it, much less crime, much less illegal immigration there. So, communities that don't have it, that are on the border, that are facing, open firing, on their back property, I'm sure they might tell you that they want to have that wall finished. And I'll find out because I'm going down there in a couple of weeks.
Oh, cool.
And so I'll report back to you on that one. But, all the interviews that I've seen, and when I hear people talking about, my community went from being a safe community to being one that now is no longer safe. I can't let my kids outside. I'm afraid to live here now. And what we need to recognize is that isn't just a border problem. It's an everywhere problem, because this doesn't stay on the border. I think we all are aware that people that are being, caught are being sent throughout the country. So it ends up in our communities. But what about the ones that aren't caught?
Right.
And we know that the policies that were in effect prior to January were really effective. And, you can talk to the sheriffs and you can talk to what happened after, before January and after January.
They just reinstituted the stay in Mexico policy. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
Like, interesting how the quick reversal on that.
Right. But, there's other things that we can do by, fixing our immigration system. So that way, migrant workers that want to be here, that our farmers are saying, look, we need to have this workforce because we can't find it here. And I think we all look around now, anyone who's trying to hire, I can tell you, I've been trying to hire for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to find work. And so, but the agricultural community has been facing that for a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've talked to farmers that say, I'm spending $18,000 to $20,000 a year to legally bring people over from Central America. So what does that do to our cost of our produce? Everything rises. There are simple things that we can do, like have work visas for these people that want to be here for just a certain period of time. They want to work.
And
they want to
make
them
considerably easier to get.
Yeah,
right,
that's,
exactly.
We alluded to earlier that we ran into each other at the conference in Bend a couple weeks ago, and I was on the immigration plank section. So, and one of the ladies in there was owns a small family farm somewhere in Oregon, and was making some of those exact same points. And I think it's super important to have people who've experienced that be able to influence, or at least be able to talk intelligently about immigration. You mentioned it's more of an urban rural thing. People in urban communities, people in Portland are all going to have an opinion about immigration,
right?
But none of them really experience needing to hire labor, not being able to find anything,
right?
And the only people you can find are these migrant workers,
right?
But the visas are incredibly hard to get, or they're expensive, and so the only people or the only companies that really can do the e-verify and jump through all the hoops for the most part are these big conglomerate factory farms. And so the smaller farms are kind of getting squeezed out because they don't have the infrastructure to bring up these guys. And so either you let your produce die on the vine, or you way overpay for local labor and then you're not profitable, or you sell your farm to the big guy.
Well, and what I've heard farmers tell me is, I didn't necessarily want to be a big farmer, but I had to become one in order to keep my family legacy going.
Oh, yeah.
Because we couldn't maintain as a small farm any longer, just because of the cost. So, I think all these issues are very complex, but I think we have solutions to them. We just have to be willing to work them. And, like I said earlier, it might be a little bit of an inflammatory statement, but, if you're for open borders, you are for slavery. It's as cut and dry as that, because people are being brought over here as slaves. Look at what happened in Josephine County over the summer. There was an illegal grow operation being run by a cartel, and there were 130 people that were caught in agricultural slavery. They were being forced to work there. They had no way out. They were without water. They were without sewer.
Wow.
They were living in hovels. They had no medical care. And this is because we had this open border policy.
Yeah.
So I think it's cut and dried.
Yeah. I think there's enough. We are such a great country. There are enough people that want to move here. I think we should, me personally, getting my views in here, raise the limits, allow more people in, but make sure that they're vetted, make sure that they go through the proper channels. I think one of the problems that we have that has caused this is we have very, very, very strict rules regarding immigration, and then nobody follows them. So if you loosen up the rules a little, and not the rules exactly, but like the quotas, loosen that up a little bit so that you can take, you match your supply and demand. You have this huge demand of people trying to come into the country. Raise your supply a little bit so you can allow more people in legally. Then you're not going to have 10-year waits on a waiting list. You're not going to have people, hanging out at the border for weeks trying to get, living under a bridge trying to get their refugee status looked at. So
I think this goes back to what I consider a crisis that we're having with intelligence. Not smarts intelligence.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
But,
I mean that too sometimes.
But, intelligence related to our national security. So if we don't know who's coming into our country, then we don't know what their intentions are towards our country. And, if you listen to any of the speeches by our Homeland Security guys or by our Border Patrol, they're saying, we know people are coming over from other nations and funneling through the border. We know what's happening. We can track when they come in. We know these are terrorists. And so if we're allowing terrorists to just come in and have free reign in our country, we have no idea where they're at. If you look at the crime reports from the Border Patrol and the people that they have been arresting, known gang members, murderers, rapists, and these are all people that those were just the ones they caught. What about the ones that are coming into your community at the house next door? Yeah. Living next to your child. We need to think about those things.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it ends up just being such a massive problem that infects so many other areas. I mean, we talked about human trafficking and the incident in Josephine County. It hits the agricultural community too, and especially it makes it problematic for the vast majority of people who do want to immigrate to the United States because they want to find good, honest work. They want to come over here and start the next Facebook or feed their family. Any of 1,000 different things because we are the greatest country on the world. It's no surprise that everybody else is going to want to come here. But when you do have individuals coming here, A, the wrong way, or B, who are coming here for nefarious reasons to recruit gang members, traffic, everything like that, it's just it ruins it and it makes it that much more difficult for everybody else.
Well, I think the left just assumes that everyone coming over is coming over just to feed their families and get a better life for themselves, and the vast majority are, I would assume. But the fact is, you're right. We just don't know because we're not tracking any of it.
We do know now because we are tracking. And we've seen the evidence of it since January. We've seen crime go up. We've seen drug use. The opioid crisis get worse. We've seen things like these illegal grow operations get worse, and those things have real effects on the communities that they're happening in. Yeah. They're harming their neighbors. They're affecting, water issues, which we already have issues for the agriculture. Yeah. So, it affects all areas of life. So this is not just an immigration issue.
Right. Agreed. Well, we are just about out of time. And so I apologize I didn't give you a heads up of this ahead of time. Usually we do. But one of the things we like to do with our guests when we end an episode is ask the question, who is your favorite Republican? Do you have a favorite Republican?
I will go with Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
Perfect.
It's a good one. Yeah. It's a good one.
Definitely a solid answer and a solid leader that I feel like his brand of leadership is just something that's however far, left, right, or center, it's just something you don't see anymore. And it's just, it's unfortunate. It's a loss for the country, the state, anybody at any level running for office. It's like you do well if you acted a lot more like the Gipper.
Yep. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And with that's it, we'll end the show. And listeners, we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Rational Republican podcast. Your hosts are James Ball and Nick Perlosky. The show today is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors of Portland, serving the greater Portland metro area for all your garage door installation and repair needs. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can email us at james@jamesaball.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can find our episodes at jamesaball.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts.